Good afternoon, students of class 7th. Today we'll be starting with the third chapter, which is a poem, the title being Somebody's Mother. Now, this is a poem about how an elderly woman was walking across the street and nobody was looking at her, nobody was concerned about her. She was so old that she would have easily met with an accident, but still nobody was concerned about her. And how one good boy, a college going boy, supported her in crossing the road. The the poetess of this poem is Mary Dow Brine. So we'll start with reading the poem first. The woman was old and ragged and grey, and bent with the chill of a winter's day. The streets were white with the recent snow, and the women's feet were aged and slow. So this is the first stanza. The woman was old and ragged and grey. Ragged means worn out. She was wearing worn out clothes. Grey means gloomy. She was sad. The, the woman was old and she had worn out clothes and she was sad. And bent with the chill of a winter's day. Winter's day means this shows the season. The season, the backdrop of the of the poem is winter. It's a winter season. And bent, she was bent. So when you become old, you tend to bend a little. So she was bent with the chill. Chill means the chill जो आपको ठंड में फील होता है, the chill you feel in the winter season. And bent with the chill of a winter's day. The streets were white with the recent snow. This means that recently there was a snowfall and the streets were white because of that snowfall. And the women's feet were aged and slow. And the women's feet were aged and slow. This shows that the woman was really, really old because the feet were aged. The feet had wrinkles. She stood at the crossing and waited long, alone, uncared for, amid the throng of human beings who passed her by, nor heeded the glance of her anxious eye. She stood at the crossing. Crossing means the crossroads, जिनको आप चौराहा भी बोलते हैं हिंदी में. She stood at the crossing and waited long. She was waiting for a very long time at the crossing because she couldn't find a way to cross the road. Alone, akela, uncared for, nobody to look after her. Amid the throng. Throng means crowd. This means crowd of human beings who passed her by, nor heeded the glance of her anxious eye. So there was a lot of crowd. There were a lot of people crossing, who were passing by her, जो उनको क्रॉस कर रहे थे, but nobody heeded. Heeded means to look. Heeded is to look, to pay attention to. Nobody heeded the glance, like nobody saw her. उनकी आंखों में जो अकेलापन था, जो दुखी थी, वो किसी ने नहीं देखा. उनकी जो आंखें worried थी. Anxious means worried. So nobody saw. There were a lot of people passing her by, but nobody saw that she was worried and she could not cross the road. Down the street with laughter and shout, glad in the freedom of school let out. Down the street means from the corner of the street. Down the street. Down the street with laughter and shout, glad in the freedom of school let out. School let out means when the school got over. So one school had just gotten over, and from the corner of the road, with a lot of laughter and shouting, came the boys like a flock of sheep. So जब स्कूल ख़त्म हुआ, एक लड़कों का ग्रुप आया, like a flock of sheep means. So this is a simile where where the group of boys is compared to a flock of sheep. A flock of sheep. So this is a comparison. Came the boys like a flock of sheep, hailing the snow piled white and deep. So snow piled white and deep means road पे a lot of snow was piled because recently snowfall हुआ था यहाँ पे. Recently snowfall हुआ था and there was a lot of snow piled up on the streets. Past the women so old and grey, hastened the children on their way. Past the women, ये जो group of boys था, they walked past the women who was old and grey. Hastened, they moved quickly, moving quickly. The children moved quickly on their way. Nor offered a helping hand to her, so meek, so timid, afraid to stir, lest the carriage wheels or the horse's feet should crowd her down in the slippery street. Nor offered a helping hand to her. Nobody offered a helping hand to her. She was waiting that somebody would notice and would help her cross the road, but nobody offered a helping hand. Helping hand means nobody came forward to help her. So meek, so timid, afraid to stir. Meek is very weak, very fragile. Timid is like very frightened. Afraid to stir. Afraid to stir. To stir means to move. This is to move. Afraid to stir. So she was afraid to move because she was so fragile and she was so frightened that she was afraid lest the carriage wheels or the horse's feet. She was afraid that the carriage wheels or the horse's feet should crowd her down in the slippery street. She was afraid that she would get hurt by the carriage wheels or the horse's feet because the streets were very slippery. Slippery why? Because of the white snow which had recently fallen, and she would fall on the ground. So crowd her down means she would fall on the ground. At last came out of the merry troop the gayest laddie of all the group. He paused beside her and whispered low, "I'll help you across if you wish to go." At last came out of the merry troop. Merry troop is the happy group. So happy and troop means group. So merry means happy, troop means group. So which merry troop are we talking about here? The group of the happy boys who had just left out from the school. At last came out of the merry troop. So one of those boys came out. He was the happiest boy, the gayest laddie of all the group. Gay means happy, laddie means boy. So he was the happiest boy of the group. He paused beside her and whispered low. He stopped right beside her, मतलब वो उनके पास आके रुके और हल्के से बोला, whispered low, हल्के से बोला, I'll help you across if you wish to go. मैं आपकी हेल्प करना चाहूँगा रोड क्रॉस करने में, इफ़ यू विश टू गो, अगर आप जाना चाहती हैं तो. So this is where we end the paraphrasing for today. In the next lecture, you will be getting the paraphrasing for the next page. Yes. So yes, in the meantime, I'll be giving you the hard words and difficult words and word meanings from this chapter, so you can write them down. Thank you so much, students. I'll see you in the next class.